Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Monkey Knife Fight Live. It's a special edition this week. Football is here. College football getting underway this week. We had a couple of top 25 teams already play before we recorded this show, but I'm your host, Dan Watkins. Joining me this week is Nick Whalen. Nick, how's it going, man? Happy football.
Happy football to you as well, man. It was surreal last night turning on the TV and seeing an actual meaningful Big Ten game and a relatively competitive one in Minneapolis between Ohio State and Minnesota. And it always sneaks up on you. I mean, obviously, we're looking forward to NFL next week as well. But man, college football, it's these opening weekends, especially, nothing really beats it. I think I've heard many people say this might be the best week one we've ever had in terms of some of the ranked versus ranked matchups, how many big name programs are in action. And I'm excited to break it down.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it like you mentioned, it does kind of creep up on you. I was looking at the rundown and stuff like that, and it's just like we got some big matches we're going to talk about here today. Clemson and Georgia obviously is the biggest one, but you got Bama, Miami, Penn State, Penn State versus Wisconsin, Florida State, Notre Dame. You had Ohio State in action last night. How do you feel about the Buckeyes, man? Because that offense looked good, but the defense, I don't know if I'm going to be all in on them going to the playoff this year if that defense is going to kind of play like that.
The defense didn't look great. That the secondary especially had some issues. Even after Minnesota lost Ibrahim, it didn't really slow down. And Ohio State, I think, was so reliant on big plays, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If your quarterback can throw like 5 passes in the second half and 4 of them go for touchdowns, that's not really something that you're going to look at on film and say, we need to correct this. But you can't rely on that all year, especially against, the big time opponents. You're not just going to be breaking off 70-yard touchdown runs left and right because Minnesota's linebacker doesn't know where he is before the play starts. But it was typical Ohio State, right? I mean, on offense, it was just our athletes are better than your athletes. We're going to get out in space, and our running backs, our receivers, even our tight ends are just going to outrun, your linebackers and your defensive backs because they're that much more physical. They're that much faster. They're that much stronger. I thought Minnesota actually played a pretty good game. They kept it closer than it looked like it was going to be early on. And part of that is just, having an experienced quarterback in Tanner Morgan. But man, when push came to shove, it was like whenever Ohio State really felt threatened, they would just rip off a huge play. And then you'd be reminded which team is the far superior one.
Yeah, and CJ Stroud, I mean, you can see why he's a 5-star recruit. I didn't think he was at his best last night, but he can only get better from there. I mean, the kid's still a freshman. He's 19 years old. So right. Talking about CJ Stroud, a lot of great quarterbacks this year in college football, a couple that stuck around, didn't go into the draft last year. We had, you had the 5 guys going in the first round from last year's draft class, but a couple guys that we don't have in contest this weekend, or at least that we're not going to break down in this show. I do want to kind of talk about off the top here and just get your kind of feel how you think the Heisman race is going to go this year, because the overwhelming betting favorite is Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma. He's at plus 650. The next guy is Bryce Young, who's I think he's taken like less than 50 snaps, but we'll get to him in a minute. And he's at plus 1100, tied with DJ Uyagule there. I already pronounced it once, so you can't hold me to that later on in the show. But how do you feel about the Heisman race?
Yeah, I'm still working through my pronunciation. Uyunglele. I think there's 2 lays at the end.
I've heard like 2 different ones. Yeah.
Yeah. The odds I'm seeing have Rattler at 6-1, Uyunglele at 7-1, Bryce Young 9-1, and then JT Daniels, Sam Howell, CJ Stroud, Matt Corral at Ole Miss, De'Aaron King, and Keaton Slovis. So your top 9 guys in the odds are all quarterbacks, and one, that speaks to the depth of how many good quarterbacks there are, like you said. 2, it speaks to the direction that this award has gone, right? Where it's just become almost every single year, it's a quarterback award. And if you're going to bet anything but a quarterback, you're probably not going to win that bet. It takes a monster individual season from a running back, plus no quarterback having an elite year for that to really be the case anymore. And obviously last year we had kind of a unique situation with Devontae Smith winning the Heisman. I think it very easily could have been Mac Jones. I think in a normal college football season, the Heisman race probably goes a little bit differently, but it's become a quarterback award. I was listening to a podcast with a bookmaker. I forget what book he worked for. He was basically like, look, if anybody comes in to our shop and wants to bet a non-quarterback for the Heisman, we don't think twice about it. We say, put as much money down as you want. That's basically free money for us.
I mean, it really does. I mean, Devonta Smith, it was really a perfect storm last year in Alabama. You had Jalen Waddle get hurt, so that pretty much just opened everything up to go right to Smith, and he ends up winning the Heisman. But let's get right into it. So tomorrow, noon Eastern time, 11 o'clock actually at the game, and I know you got the Badger poster there behind you. So let's talk a little Penn State, Wisconsin, Big Ten football. This one kicks off at noon. The over-under for the game is 50 points, and the only reason I'm mentioning that is because I feel like the higher the over is, that means the bookies and the Sharks are expecting these guys to throw the ball. But both these more or less numbers for these two quarterbacks, Sean Clifford and Graham Mertz, are relatively low. So let's start with Sean Clifford before I let you go off on Wisconsin here for a couple minutes. Sean Clifford, he's a 2-year starter. He's a senior. His more or less number is 175.5. He hit that number in 5 of 9 games last year. He struggled a little bit. He got benched at one point, but he says with the new offensive coordinator that they have there, he's getting his confidence back. So how do you feel about Sean Clifford in this one?
Yeah, like you said, these numbers are both relatively low. The 5 games that he went over this number last year were all well over. The lowest of those was 232 yards. So it was kind of like he either plays horribly or plays really well. And I think Wisconsin is going to be really solid on defense, as always. I think we probably think of Wisconsin as like just this running back factory, but defensively, they've been really, really consistent for the last decade, regardless of who the head coach has been. Like the way that they develop pretty mediocre talent, frankly, on the defensive end into really good players by the time these guys are juniors and seniors has been really impressive. So I don't think Penn State necessarily walks all over Wisconsin, but 175.5 in a game that, is expected to be played probably in the high 20s. I think this could easily go over 50 with the way both these teams are multidimensional and can move the ball. I'm inclined to go over on Sean Clifford. I think Penn State, this game is at Wisconsin. Both teams coming off of weird COVID years. Penn State was really disappointing. Wisconsin, it felt like, was just discombobulated all of last year, never really had its complete team, kind of a throwaway year for both teams. It's hard to expect, or hard to know, I should say, exactly what to expect. But I'm surprised Penn State is a 5.5 point dog here. I mean, they are clearly the more talented team. They return a slightly more experienced quarterback in Sean Clifford. I think there's a lot of upside with Graham Mertz, but he really has only had like 1.5 good games. And I think a lot of the hype around Mertz and around the Wisconsin offense is a little more speculative. Whereas, with Penn State, it's not like they have Saquon Barkley back, but you at least have some more proven commodities. I think Penn State keeps this game close, and I hate to say it, but potentially wins and pulls the slight upset in Madison.
Yeah, I like the over on both these guys. We'll get to Mertz in a second here, but another reason I like the over is it's the first weekend in September. It's not like this game's being played in late November, early December, where we could, have a blizzard or something like that, whatever goes on in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So let's get to Mertz here. He started last year. He's a redshirt sophomore, played 7 games. He threw 9 touchdowns in those 7 games, but 5 of them were in week 1 where he kind of went off against Illinois at home in Madison. Mertz, that number for him is 165.5. He hit that number in 4 of 7 games last year. That number feels low for a sophomore who does have experience. How do you feel about Mertz and your Badgers?
I kind of like the under on this one. Going in a little bit conservatively. It's a low number, certainly. More than capable of going over. But I think if Wisconsin's game plan goes as they want it to, I don't think Graham Mertz needs to throw for, over 150 yards. I think ideally they run for like 270 yards, and Graham Mertz goes like 9 of 11 for an efficient, like 130 yards and 2 touchdowns to a tight end on the goal line. I don't think Wisconsin, like, now they in theory, they now have the ability to air it out and be a little bit more, 2-dimensional than they've been for the last 70 years. But again, we haven't really seen it outside of that Illinois game. Graham Mertz has looked good, not great. The one, I guess, thing that does make me think twice about this is, you do bring back your 2 top receivers from last year, Danny Davis, Kendrick Pryor. It's not often that Wisconsin has legitimate talent, returning talent at the receiver position. And you have a really good tight end in Jake Ferguson as well. So, you have some weapons in place. Mertz is familiar with those guys. But at the end of the day, I think Wisconsin, as always, wants to establish the run. And unless they fall behind by a touchdown or 2 early on, I think they're going to stay committed to the run. And I think we kind of ease Graham Mertz in as a passer. This is not Illinois. This is Penn State. It's going to be hard to sling the ball around on them. I think we see a very different game from Graham Mertz than we saw in last year's opener.
It's a good point. Good point. Moving on to the next one, you got Alabama, Miami. These games just get better as the day goes on Saturday. This one is the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. It's a neutral site game being played in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The over-under for this one is 61.5. Alabama, a heavy favorite. And a big reason why is this quarterback they have, Bryce Young, who played pretty much in mop-up duty last year behind Mac Jones, only attempted 22 passes the entire season, 156 yards, but we've already heard so much about this kid because of the nil contracts and all that kind of stuff and the endorsement deals and everything. Lane Kiffin, I believe it was, that kind of like blew up his spot, and then Saban said some stuff, but this kid apparently is going to be making close to $1 million, at least over $800,000 in endorsements. So, he's supposed to be legit, but let's see it here as he gets his first start against the Hurricanes. The number for Bryce Young is 335.5 yards. And don't forget too, he's got Bill O'Brien as his offensive coordinator now, who's entering coaching rehab in Tuscaloosa. So how do you feel about Bryce Young?
Man, this one is so tough. I mean, obviously Bryce Young is talented enough to go over pretty much any number. I think it's crazy to think now where Mac Jones is, the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. But I think a lot of people thought this was going to be Bryce Young's job at some point last year. And Mac Jones just kept playing well. And all of a sudden, they're winning the national title and Bryce Young is still your backup. But man, in terms of recruiting pedigree, he's as good as any quarterback that Alabama has had. I mean, maybe better. This is going to be the most dynamic, I think, two-way quarterback that they've had. They've had some really good passers and some really good runners. Think Jalen Hurts, think Tua as a passer, but I think Bryce Young is probably the best combination that they'll have had. And it speaks, you look at this line, like Miami is not a great team by any means, but a ton of talent there. And Alabama is favored by 19.5 points and a neutral site. So if you believe that Alabama is going to win this game by 3 touchdowns, then I think there's a pretty good chance that Bryce Young goes over this number. I mean, it is a ton of yards, but Alabama has been very willing to open up this offense over the last several years. Even though they have fantastic running backs and have had fantastic running backs, basically dating back to when Nick Saban took the job, they are now a, air it out type of offense. And, I think the one concern for me is we're kind of going to be introduced to a whole new set of Alabama receivers. If you watch college football last year, all about John Mechie, but other than that, I mean, Jamison Williams, Slade Bolden, JoJo Earl, Agayi Hall, like these are not household names by any means. And part of that speaks to just how great, that 4-man receiver class that we've seen get drafted in the first round over the last 2 years, how great those guys were. Maybe this is the next iteration of that. But, we have to see those guys grow into the legitimate, first round type of weapons that help guys like Hurts and Tua and Mac Jones, put up massive numbers in this offense.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Mechie because I think he has a chance to be that next great Bama receiver. Yeah. I mean, we see it every year, right? From last year, you had 2 of them go in the first round with Waddle and Smith. You had Jerry Jeudy before that, and all the way back to Amari Cooper and Julio Jones and all those guys. But I think Mechie is that next guy that can take that next step and possibly be a first-round pick next spring in the NFL draft. So on the other side of this one, you got De'Aaron King. He's a 6th-year player. Missed a couple, there was a transfer year after Houston. There was an injury year, but last year, so his number for this one more or less is 218.5. He hit that number in 8 of 11 games last year, but just twice in 4 games against ranked opponents. So he does struggle a little bit against the better competition. And another thing to watch out for with King, he ran for over 500 yards last season. So he is that dual threat that might take away from those passing yard numbers. And then while we brought up Neil with Bryce Young, it's a little more of a modest number for King. He's set to make a little over 20,000 in endorsement deals this season. So how do you feel about
that's it? That seems way low.
That's what I read last night. So
in Miami of all places too.
Right. I think it's the 6th-year thing. So
yeah,
it's been there a little too long. Get out.
Yeah, not a lot of upside. The guy's like 25 years old. It is crazy. Like I was looking at his like football reference page this morning, and it's like this goes back to 2016. Like I've been thought about, like he's got to be the only player in the country who was active in 2016. I like the under here. The number I'm seeing is 218.5 on Monkey Knife Fight. That's too high. I mean, I think Miami's going to play this game from behind, probably from like 2 minutes in onward. So that scares me a little bit. I mean, they're going to have to throw the ball. I don't worry about De'Aaron King running all that much. I think Alabama has so much speed on defense that they're just not really all that concerned about it. Like they want to make De'Aaron King throw as much as he has to. If he's running for 70 plus yards, something has gone wrong. Like that means Miami's probably moving the ball pretty well. But I don't see that happening in this game. Like you said, a lot of D'Eriq King's big games last year came against inferior competition, defenses that don't have the kind of speed that Alabama has. I like D'Eriq King. He's a really exciting player to watch. He's going to be a guy that is kind of on the fringe of the Heisman race, I think, for a lot of the year. But this is a really, really tough opener. And, I hope Miami competes. I hope we get a really good game. This is the headliner, certainly in the late afternoon window. But I think this is probably similar to that Clemson game last year for Miami, where, King finished that one 12 of 28 for 121 yards, 2 picks. When you're forced into a lot of third and longs, a lot of second and longs, and the defense knows you're passing, and it's the Alabama defense, that creates problems. So I think he has to throw it a lot, but I don't think we see a lot of completions. I don't think we see a lot of chunk plays for this Miami offense. I like the under on D'Eriq King.
Yeah, I agree with you there. As I mentioned before, he only hit that number twice in 4 games against ranked opponents last season. Clemson dominated them. North Carolina, who is very good, they're a top 10 team to start the year, but they're not Alabama. Let's be honest here. They gave him fits as well. So I like the less number with D'Eriq King. And then Saturday night, the big one. This game, gotta love having national championship implications week 1 right away off the start with Clemson, Georgia. This one also a neutral site game. It's being played at Bank of America Stadium in North Carolina. Hang on, I have the where is the actual what they're calling this one, because I thought it was pretty funny. The
Duke's Mayo Bowl.
Yes, right? the Duke Mayo Classic coming to you from 7:30 Saturday night. Don't miss that one. You got JT Daniels, a redshirt junior at Georgia. The more or less number for him is 260.5. He topped that number in 3 of 4 games with the Bulldogs last year. He was not supposed to be the starter. Eventually he won that job and they stuck with him. There was I think he was 3rd on the depth chart to start the season after transferring from USC to Kirby Smart's offense over at UGA. I like JT Daniels a lot. Mm-hmm. I think he's gonna surprise a lot of people this year and really take that next step with the Bulldogs and having Kirby Smart as his head coach. How do you feel about that 260.5 number with JT Daniels?
I think it's very attainable. Yeah, I think he did kind of start the season buried in the depth chart, but a lot of that was one, transferring, and then 2 being injured early on. I think they would have liked to get him on the field a lot sooner than they did, especially considering some of the other quarterback options that they were rolling out there through the first 6 weeks of the season. This is a big time quarterback prospect. Talent wise, there's no question. He has pretty much, the same kind of arm talent as any of the best quarterbacks in the country. So it's not like this is some 2-star who worked his way up. He is very talented, very much on the NFL radar. Clemson has, I think, arguably the most talent in the country in terms of the front 4. The linebacking core is really good, but the down linemen that they have on defense are unbelievable. They're relatively unproven. They're young. They're kind of in that same phase as Alabama, where a lot of the recognizable names that college football fans know from the last 2-3 years, all those guys have pretty much moved on. And we're going to be introduced to a new generation of Alabama and Clemson stars. But the talent that these teams are bringing in is just as good, if not better, than the talent that they're replacing. So even though we don't know a lot of the names yet, we will certainly become familiar with them probably by the end of Saturday night. So this is going to be an incredible game. I think talent-wise, Georgia and Clemson is about as equal as it gets. Georgia has always been, right on the doorstep as far as kind of joining that club of Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, maybe even Oklahoma. And I think they think this is the year that they maybe have enough continuity and enough talent to get there. There's a lot of inexperience in the Clemson secondary. I think this is a very attainable number for JT Daniels. I think if it was 25 yards higher, I would maybe feel a little bit differently. But I don't think Georgia's going to be able to run the ball extremely effectively against this Clemson defensive line. I think we're going to see a decent amount of passing, especially in the second half of this game. So I like JT Daniels to go over 260.5 is the number I'm seeing on Monkey Knife Fight.
Yeah, as do I. One thing, though, to watch out with Daniels in this Georgia offense, their star wide receiver, George Pickens, is going to be out for a little bit, I think until at least halfway through this season, it sounds like. So he's going to be without his top guy throwing the ball to Saturday night. But I still think Daniels is going to get that number because they're going to have to throw late. This game feels to me like it's going to come down to, the last 5 minutes or so, and whoever has the ball last is going to head home with the victory here. But I also think I read that this is the first time 2 top 5 teams have met week 1 in maybe at least in a long time. It's definitely.
I know it's the best. I read somewhere that it's like if you take the average of the rankings, it's the best week 1 matchup we've had since I think 2017, which was the Alabama Florida State decimation. That was the DeAndre Francois injury game. Yep. Yeah, that was over from the start.
Yep. So, and then we go to Clemson here. DJ Uiagalelei, pronounce it again. Look at that, 2 for 2. Anyways, Uiagalelei came in 2 different games last year. He started. Trevor Lawrence had the COVID thing in the middle of the year. More or less for him is 290.5. This guy is a Heisman candidate. Heisman, he's like that second tier behind Spencer Rattler. He passed that number with ease in both of his starts last season for the Tiger. So it's the post Trevor Lawrence era here in South Carolina for Clemson. How do you feel about Uiagalelei?
Well, first of all, sorry, I'm a little distracted. The Celtics just traded Chris Dunn and Carson Edwards for Juancho Hernan-Gomez. So, if the internet melts, if the internet melts down, we'll know why. No, I like the over on DJU. I think this is a guy who I think is kind of going to be the, until someone knocks him off, he's going to be the favorite to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in 2023 when he's eligible. What we saw from him when he replaced Trevor Lawrence for those games last season was extremely impressive. I mean, they took that loss to Notre Dame, but it had nothing to do with what Uiagalelei, put out there on the field. I mean, he looked every bit the part. A massive arm, just massive guy in general. Like he is a prototypical, he is kind of a right. But he's still almost more of like a pass first guy. Like I don't think anyone considered Cam Newton to be like as great of a pure passer as DJU already is, and he's not as good of a runner. I mean, Cam Newton was an absolute.
Yeah, I was just talking about body type.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he's kind of like a mix of like peak Roethlisberger and Cam Newton. Right, I don't think he's quite as like physical as Cam Newton was, where he's like, I won't just run a quarterback dive and run you over every single play. I don't know if DJU has quite that kind of power, but he has the body. Certainly, he's huge, and I don't think he's scared to make any throws. Like he loves taking deep shots. This Clemson offense loves taking deep shots. And like Alabama, I mean, they have so many pieces to replace that, you're maybe a little bit skeptical of the weapons that we're not familiar with. They finally don't have Travis Etienne for the first time in like 10 years. So we'll see how they adjust to that. But man, I mean, this Clemson offense is reaching Alabama territory where it's just plug and play. It doesn't matter, swap out 1 5-star for another. They just keep on rolling. I'm still not really sure how this game plays out. I would like to think that Georgia can finally get over the hump and get this win, but I don't think that precludes DJU from getting over 300 yards.
Yeah, I mean, for both these teams, as we mentioned, the national title implications already, because neither one, I mean, Georgia in the SEC East, and then you've got Clemson in the ACC. They'll play North Carolina at some point, but there's just not another opponent that if whoever loses this game tomorrow night is going to be able to get those style points that will impress the playoff committee. But I do just want to bring up in my notes here, I have a little Trevor Lawrence stat for you guys, and I want to test your college football trivia if you can guess these 2 names that are ahead of Trevor Lawrence on this list. So he went 34-2 as a starter. His winning percentage as a starting quarterback in FBS history trails only 2 guys from within the last 20 years. They were both very, very good national title winners. Definitely with one, the second one, I think, but he was definitely in the national title game. If you can guess these 2 guys, you get some bonus points. I don't know what they're good for, but you get bonus points.
Jalen Hurts?
No, not Reese. You got to go at least. They're both 15 years ago.
Tebow? Oh, really? Okay. Sam Bradford?
Nope.
Not Tebow.
One more.
Troy Smith?
Troy
nope.
Smith.
Chris Leak?
Nope. You have any schools are Miami and USC.
Oh, okay. 15 years ago.
Oh, Leinart.
I mean, Matt Leinart? Carson
Matt Leinert's one.
Okay. Who was Kyle Wright? Was he the Miami quarterback?
Nope. This guy played for the 49ers in the NFL. He was part of like the last great U teams. Ken Dorsey.
Okay.
Ken Dorsey.
Yep. All right.
So Trevor Lawrence.
Okay, that was a poor showing.
Yeah. So that was the great.
You get no bonus points.
No bonus points. But anyway, so
we just lost all credibility.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, you guys can try. We'll try trivia some other time. But anyways, let's just to recap here. For Sean Clifford, you're going more. For Graham Mertz, you're going less. Bryce Young, we're going more. De'Ara King, less. JT Daniels, we're going more, and DJ Uiagalelei we're going more as well. Before we wrap things up, I looked at that, but that's just a little too much jersey for me. Anyways, yeah, maybe Belichick will take one of those guys and make him like an all-pro. Yeah, he'll be an all-pro safety 3 years.
Yep,
exactly. And before we wrap up here, though, anybody stopping Alabama from going back to back?
I don't think so. I mean, like the safe answer is no, right? I mean, like when in doubt, just say Alabama's going to win the national title. I don't know. I mean, we're in the same boat that we are every year, where it's like it feels like there are probably 4 teams that can win, and I would take Alabama as the safest option of those 4. But if it's not them, it's going to be Clemson, Ohio State, or Georgia, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only other team though I kind of like Oklahoma. I feel like I'm jumping on the bandwagon here for the Sooners. Spencer Rattler, I think, is legit. I think he's the best quarterback that Lincoln Riley's had. That includes Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. Spencer Rattler, I think, is that good, and I think he can take them to the next level. And then, finally, at least win a playoff game for once, because we've seen Oklahoma there 4 times now, and they've given up an average of, I think it was 49.8 points in those 4 games. But the defense this year, they have a new defensive coordinator. He's in his 2nd or 3rd year, so his recruits are actually in the program now, and I think Oklahoma might actually be able to make some noise in January.
We'll see. I feel like they become like the Utah Jazz of college football, where it's like, all right, good for you. You won 58 games in the regular season, but call us when you actually make the Western Conference Finals.
It's the Big 12, and it's just the Big 12. And then so that's gonna. Oh wait, we do have one more game. So the contest isn't up because the Florida State coach can't make up his mind of who his starting quarterback is going to be. So if that does somehow happen before Sunday, it might be up there. This is a Sunday night kickoff, 7:30 Sunday night between Notre Dame and Florida State. Notre Dame, I mean, listen, I'm a Fighting Irish fan, and it's just the same thing every year. I've pretty much just come to the point, just like I know I'm going to be disappointed around New Year's because of the Irish and how they're just probably not going to show up in a big spot. But Florida State, not very good as well. If the old Bill Parcells saying, if you got 2 quarterbacks, you got no quarterbacks, and that's what's going on, I think, in Tallahassee with the Seminoles. Jack Cohen, former Wisconsin Badger, is now going to be the Notre Dame quarterback this year. He's supposed to be this guy. I don't really remember much of watching him in Wisconsin, but apparently he doesn't turn the ball over, which I guess is his best trait. So we'll see about the Irish.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. Maybe not a great sign when that's your best trait. It's like, hey, he doesn't really do anything well, but he will not turn the ball over.
Yeah, he's just going to manage the game. All right.
Yes, he's the next great game manager in a long line of Wisconsin game managers.
Yeah, exactly. I saw he had like the best completion percentage since Russell Wilson, so that's a nice little stat. But yeah, I mean, Notre Dame should win this game. But yeah, I don't expect an offensive fireworks showing either Sunday night from either one of these teams, because I just don't think their offenses on either squad is that good. So I think that's going to do it for us. You came here and you found out where we both like Alabama to win the national championship. Big shocker. Maybe Oklahoma or someone else surprises them. But Nick, thanks for joining me this week. Can't wait to talk some NFL with you. Maybe we'll do some more special edition college football shows as the season goes on. But thanks, guys, and don't forget to click that subscribe button.